The Diabuddies podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first speaking to your doctor.
Welcome back, everyone and fellow Diabuddies, to the Diabuddies podcast. Today, Dr. Grady and myself are going to just go pure boxes up and just have a conversation, shoot the shit, go a little off script. But before we get into that, today we have an update announcement about the podcast. So near the end of the episode, so stay tuned to the end, so we can kind of talk about some exciting new things coming in the future of the podcast. But with that being said, let me first just ask, Grady, what's going on in your diabetic world these days?
It's been interesting because I'm a person of habit, and schedule is like a big thing in my life. And so, being when I first got out of school, out of chiropractic school, and I had really no set schedule. Would have to set my own schedule now. It was just it was tough. Keeping everything, trying to be as consistent as possible and everything. And so I've gotten used to that a little bit, but now that I am down here in Arizona and I'm working on getting my practice going, I really, really have no schedule. I can stay up late and wake up late, or go to bed early, wake up early, or sometimes go to bed late, wake up early. But so it's kind of just all over the place, which makes diabetes hard because, the more you can keep things consistent, whether it be your diets, whether that's food and timing, or also exercise and and not necessarily you're working out, but then also the movement that you get throughout the day. If it's way off or not very consistent, then that just makes it that much harder. That being said, though, the last couple of weeks, I feel like my diabetes has been pretty dialed in. I've been trying to make my schedule a little bit more consistent as far as waking up and the time that I go to work out and the times that I'm eating. I try to make them as consistent as possible. And so far, the last couple of weeks has been pretty nice. I haven't been surprised by highs or lows very often. So that always is kind of a good gauge for me, is how often I get surprised by random numbers. Because I've talked about before, when I get surprised by high numbers, it can irritate me.
Right.
But lately that hasn't been happening, even though there's some times where I've felt high. Some of my indicators are getting really thirsty, or if I have no appetite, because I always have an appetite, I can always eat. And so if I don't feel like eating, I'm my blood sugar must be high, because that's about the only time I don't feel like eating. And so, but lately, even when I've had some of those, I'll check it and it's fine. I think because that happens because obviously it's much hotter down here, and at the same time, it's drier down here, and you don't notice how much fluid you're losing. And so I think I've been struggling more with staying hydrated. There'd be some days where I am outside for a long time and doing some sort of exercise, and I lose a lot of water, but I don't feel like I lost a lot of water. So I don't rehydrate as much as I need to. And then I'm I feel like I'm high, but then I check it and I'm not. I'm must just not be hydrated enough.
Yeah, that's I was gonna ask you that too. Was you moved from St. Louis, Missouri, a very humid dome, allergy heavy area, lots of pollen, other allergens, and just so much humidity. And you moved to Arizona, Phoenix area, that's super hot. You were just talking about that. But so do you feel like the dehydration affects the randomness or affects your hyperglycemia? Because I think growing up, for me, I've always lived in the Midwest, for the most part. I've visited elsewhere for a short or extended periods of time. But obviously we know that, and we've talked about, in the earlier episodes, hydration status, how that affects blood sugar, but it's almost hard to see because there's so many variables that will affect our sugars. It's almost sometimes hard to see how hydration can affect your blood sugar. So, moving from one climate to a little bit more drastic of a difference, besides just the hydration feeling and maybe the hyperglycemia, have you noticed an overall trend? Is it easier to see?
Interesting enough, like I don't get affected as much by the heat as what I would have thought, or what, like, based off of the textbooks you would think I would be noticing. I've kind of always said this, like I'm like a camel, like somehow I retain water, and like I can go a long time without drinking water even in the heat and feel totally fine.
Because your seat is
And
having it swollen, you got a bunch of big hump back there.
yeah. And so like I don't notice much, even when I'm in the heat. Like only until recently have I noticed like the lack of appetite is really the only indicator that I'll get that I'm not very hydrated, or not hydrated enough. And as soon as I drink like a couple glasses of water, I feel back to normal. And so as far as in relation to the diabetes and numbers wise, because feeling is different than what the numbers are.
Right.
And numbers wise, honestly, I feel like they're almost better. I feel like they're better. They're more consistent here than they were in St. Louis and even in Nebraska. Nebraska and St. Louis are pretty similar as far as their weather goes and the humidity goes. And so that's kind of what I've been used to my whole life. But here, I feel like it's just been more consistent and not as much up and down, which is interesting. You would think since it's so much hotter that my blood sugar would be affected a lot more, but that hasn't been the case. Like even on days like I think I posted on my running app a while back that I ran like a 3 mile loop when it was like 117, 116.
Are you using Strava still?
Yeah, it was a
No.
while ago. I haven't ran in a while, but it
I
was a
was like, I
while
haven't
ago.
seen you on Strava in a while. What the hell?
Yeah. And I was expecting to have, a fairly dramatic fluctuation in blood sugar, whether that was up or down. I figured something was going to happen. But in all honesty, it was completely normal. So I haven't really noticed much of a difference blood sugar wise. And if I have, it's almost been better and a little bit more stable down here versus up in St. Louis.
Wow, that's interesting. So do you have a plan to get your sleep schedule back on track? Because yeah, I've seen you pretty wild out there after you graduated. And you're playing video games, you were sleeping on bean bags, you were not the Grady that I knew when I was
Yep.
still in school, and you were a different person.
Yeah. So now that I've finally gotten an office space and we're going to be able to get in there this week and start working on it and getting it ready, I'm going to start waking up at a consistent time every day. And that way I can get my workout in right away. Because I know me, when I get working on a project, I want to finish it and not stop. So what I plan on doing is waking up early, going to the early, CrossFit class, and then, doing whatever I need to do that day to get everything done and ready. And then I'll probably just keep that when I go and start working, go work out before work, and then I'll be done with it. So yeah, I'm planning on getting on more consistent schedule.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm struggling in that too. I mean, my schedule is booked solid as hell. But in terms of my sleep schedule, getting consistent, as we were just talking before we hit the record button now, that's something of all my own personal health battles. And, we've kind of commented on a little bit in a few episodes here and there. Just sleep schedule and sleep hygiene has been always the bane of my existence. Like,
Yeah.
easily the most impacted and impactful, like one thing I need to do to get things stable and for other parts of my health. And I just, I've always tossed it to the side, and I'm just sick of it, so I'm trying to get more back on that consistent schedule. But when you're doing so many things, you're opening your own practice down there in Phoenix, Arizona, and with what I'm doing with my practice and a couple other my projects, it's hard, and I say this to empathize with anybody else out there that is just doing a million things. Like, it's hard not to sacrifice your sleep, and some people would disagree. Some people like, no, I need my sleep, and all the power to those people. Keep that value. But if you don't already have that as a value, for me, it's hard to actually change your habit and do the hard work of lifestyle change. But that's what you and I are essentially with our patients always try to do, is lifestyle change, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, that's the one thing that I need to work on. So I'm trying to work on that myself here. And hopefully my numbers are more stable, because it's definitely, I've been able to find patterns throughout the years, in various ways, but it might change once I get consistent sleep. Everything might change, which
Mm-hmm.
probably will. Insulin sensitivity would probably go way up. So
Yeah. It's sleep is a hard thing, because especially when you have a lot of responsibilities or whatever, um, like you want to get as much done as you can, and at the same time you have those days or those nights, or sometimes it's every night, where you just want to like lay in bed and watch TV, or watch your show or watch a movie, and that takes you another hour or a couple hours into the night where you could have been sleeping, or you're scrolling on social media for 2 hours. And so like, and that's hard. It's hard to cut that out of your life. Like, but sometimes you have to think about like what's going to be more beneficial for you. And sometimes it's just a matter of like taking that step to try it. Cause
right.
and that's sometimes the hardest part, is just starting, because you're like, man, I'm so used to watching the show every night before I go to bed. How about one night? I can go back to doing it again, but how about one night this week? I'm gonna go to bed and not watch that show and just see how I feel. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that's just enough to get that momentum going, and then you start making those better decisions, even without trying. You don't even, the next day you like feel so good that you're like, you don't even think about watching that show because you're ready for bed.
Right, right. Yeah. It's but managing, I think that's almost a hard addiction. Because then there's like an actual addiction. For me, it's a lack of value, right? But if you're scrolling, I'll call it the death scroll. If you're doing death scroll, or if you are watching a show, like that is a habit. That is an addiction. That's
Mm-hmm.
hard to break. That can be a hard conscious thing to break. Where me, it's hard because or anyone that's just go. It's the value of sleep doesn't equate the value of getting everything else done within that before that day is done. So they're hard for different reasons, but I think majority of people fall under probably, what you described, and trying to give up the scroll, or give up, Netflix or Disney Plus, or insert the equivalent of all the direct TV subscriptions back, just 10, 15 years ago, whatever it might
Mm-hmm.
be. That for sure is a really hard thing to do, and will affect anyone's blood sugar, right?
Yeah.
Now, you also, moving out there, you joined CrossFit, right?
Yeah, I did.
How that's I've kind of alluded to, those types of HIIT workouts, and we've talked about those HIIT workouts affecting blood sugar differently. Curious with my neurological windup and my, like, we've talked about the difference between you and I and some of these things in working out in the past. And I guess I don't mean this to be more interview, but I'm actually just curious. Um, it's so easy for us to go in interview mode on this
Yeah.
podcast. But so I guess last interview type question to you is that, do you find your blood sugar spikes up a lot, or how do you find it during the two different types of CrossFit classes that you're going to? And if so, like, how drastic is it? Because I know mine can ramp up pretty high there, depending on what you do.
Yeah, it's been interesting, because going into it, like I know how intense the CrossFit workout is, because I've done CrossFit type workouts, um, just not in a CrossFit gym. And so going into it, I expected to probably drop low. And if not in the class, because, obviously the burst of exercise is fairly short. So it may not get low in the class, but maybe a little bit towards the end of it. And surprisingly, it's like perfectly level throughout the whole thing, even when I get home. However, I feel I kind of feel the symptoms coming on, even though when I check it, it's not there. And so, but then what I do notice is like maybe an hour afterwards is when things might start to drop. But if I do absolutely nothing, it usually stays fairly level.
Really?
Um, but I will say I am very insulin sensitive after the workouts. So if I have, so a lot of times I'll come home and have like a protein shake with like some honey or something in it just to get some carbs in. And so I'll take the normal amount that I need to for that, or a couple of times I did. And man, I would I would get so low. I'd have to drink like 4 or 5 juice boxes. And
No.
so I started just waiting and seeing if I needed to take any more, or at the very most I'd take like 1 unit, despite having probably like 30 or 40 grams of carbs, basically grams of sugar in that.
Wow. That's so interesting. Again, echoes to the individuality of diabetes and your personal health and how you manage it versus somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure it is documented, with HIIT workouts and normal glycemic, or insert whatever muggle name we haven't come up with, or for non-diabetics, that a HIIT workout will raise blood sugars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see too, with mine as well, which I've talked about a little bit. So that's interesting that you stay level. Then your insulin sensitivity would increase afterwards, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's probably a safe bet that most diabetics or anyone's insulin sensitivity would increase afterwards.
Yeah.
But that's interesting that you just stay level, that you don't drop low or go high during it. Now, are you wearing a CGM to know that, or are you still finger pricking right now?
Mainly finger pricking. I think I was wearing a CGM for like 1 week. But yeah, mainly finger pricking. And so I'm checking before and immediately after, and then obviously several times after, because I'm like, what's it doing? Where's it going? So yeah, like before and after, like literally the same number.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Dr. Grady, the robot of diabetes.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. That's one thing that I've been doing. I'm running, I'm training for, another marathon, which is partly inspired by Don Muchow, and then partly inspired by a couple other things going on in my life. But I'm training for my marathon, and hydration definitely has been interesting to train up here during the summertime, because last time I was here, I was trained during the winter.
Yeah.
Essentially, I was training January to April, so it was running in snow and ice, and now I'm training in the summer, humidity and things like that, and not having enough water on me and whatever else. But overall, I would say my blood sugar is more stable than it was, maybe a year and a half ago, which is interesting, because often now I wake up at a stable level of 100 or 150, and probably the perfect, I would say for myself, the perfect running number would be like 130. It's a little bit high enough baseline, or target range to like float you a little bit. You don't have to do some extra stuff, because what I found for myself with running, if I run and it's like I'm at 160 or 180 or a little bit higher, if I, or even like above 200, I know you run to like lower your blood sugar, but depending on the run, if I'm going a slow burn, which is what I'm doing distance for the most part.
Yeah.
Some days I'm doing speed training out on track, but if I'm doing a slow burn, that blood sugar is going to actually stay high for me. And
Wow.
so, but if I wake up and I'm like close to like 105 or 97, I'm almost like, fuck, I have to like, I have to like eat, and I don't like to eat before I run.
Yeah.
So, or now thinking about, now that I'm in longer distances, thinking about the stability of where I'm at, like, was it a Saturday? I was like stable at like 180 in the morning. I had to push my run off to like 1 o'clock, because I had a meeting from like 9 to 12. on a Saturday. And I thought at the meeting there was gonna be food because there always is, and there was no food. And so like I've only had like water. I guess I'll just kind of walk through this like little like what I did for this long run. So at the time I was like, all right, stop drinking coffee. Like you need water. You're not getting any like carbohydrates in. Like you need to be like a little bit more less jittery. So I'm trying to drink as much water as I can. And because if you run with insulin on board and like bolus quickly before a run, that's going to be a disaster too. So there's a fine balance of like if you're high, how much do you bolus for? But I find myself if I bolus fully, I'm going to crash during the run. But if I don't bolus, I've been playing with percentage of the bolus recommendation based on my value. Like if I bolus instead of 1 unit, which would be appropriate, let's say for a correction, if I did 75% of that, bolus 0.75, it's not nearly enough. It will bring it down by like 20 units or something. It's not that extra 25% is exactly what my body needs to have the full sensitivity effect of the insulin to actually recruit as much GLUT4 as I need to, stabilize my blood.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to reach a certain threshold for it to actually like kick in.
Right. So that like bolusing when you're high is tricky before a run that way. So I was like 180, so it's a little bit higher like than I would like it to be before a run. But I haven't eaten all day. I'm about to do a 15-mile run, and it's like 80 degrees, decent amount of humidity. It's like a decent like Midwest, like it's not super hot, but a decent Midwest summer day to run in the middle of the day. Like I'm running at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, like the peak of the heat, right?
Yeah.
I haven't eaten anything, so I was like, what am I going to eat? And this was an interesting response, and it was a little bit too much, but it still ended up being fine. So I ended up having 4 scrambled eggs with a lot of salt. I made sure to put a lot of salt in there, try and drink a lot of water. I had like a branched chain amino acid, like mixed drink. And then I had a bar, and that I should stop right there. Should stop right there and continue drinking. But then I ended up having a goo beforehand. And when you run with type 1 diabetes, you're more likely than not gonna be consuming more goos than a regular distance runner because of the sugar aspect of it. So I had a goo beforehand, and I literally spiked to like 330 in the first few miles. Because I've told you, you almost need to do a basal percentage, right?
Yeah.
So like I brought it down to like 75%. And so like it spiked up super high, but it was like, I know it's coming down. And it eventually did. It was coming down, and I actually had it after the initial crash, like maybe went to like 67, but I knew it like at 150 when it was going down fast. I had goos, I had glucose tabs, and changed my percentage basal rates like 30%, 50%, things like that. For most of the run, then I was stable at like, I want to say 113. I was actually like, it was this big crash and burn, but I didn't burn too much. I quickly got to where I need to be. And for me, I find if I can survive the first 90 minutes of if I can survive the first 90 minutes of a run, that's a funny phrase, then my blood sugar is pretty stable on a run, no matter the situation. Unless it's just 220 and it's just I'm in this inflammatory insulin resistant model, and the running, like Don was talking about, just you're so stressed, like the only thing to do would be to stop running. And so for me, it's been interesting having more stability going into runs than I probably have in the past, and my schedule just being different because it's a whole different level of diabetes management and running those hours that you're out there and trying to get water and all the sugar you need and electrolytes and everything like that. It's a fun battle. It's a fun balance. So
yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
well, it is to some degree. Well, it was actually so I had to last 2.5 miles of this run. I had to do a lot of walking and running and stopping.
This was a 15-mile run?
Yeah. So during training, that's okay. It's not necessarily my goal for this marathon to never not run. My second marathon, that was the goal, was like diabetes control and never stop moving. That's not necessarily my goal this time. And the situations are different. So when I was running, and it was just hard. So I had to walk and run a lot and stop because of my hydration level, because of all this energy expenditure in my brain for managing my blood sugar. So I was dogging it. I had to go into a coffee shop to get water for a little while. Like I was just like I was dying, and not literally. And but the last half a mile, it was like this flip, and like it was this pure like breaking the wall moment that runners get, and it feels so good because it's such a metaphor of bringing it to any aspect of life, of of literally you've gone through hours of torture, and then all of a sudden there's this moment of like, wow, I'm actually doing it, and this actually feels good, and I'm damn proud of myself. And like there's that's almost like the runner's high for me. It's like, fuck, I can do this. And you get like this just second wind, and just you feel the fibers in your quads contracting, and it's just this you're just being propelled and pulled in from a different sense, and it feels good. So it was fun. And then now I get to do it all again this coming weekend, but 16 miles. So but yeah, so it's a fun time, but balancing that and weightlifting is always a fun challenge. So
Yeah, I bet.
But I know you haven't seen a lot of patients recently, but I thought one of these interactions with one of my patients was funny. She knows that I'm a type 1 diabetic too, and I try to, when it's appropriate, I let my patients know I'm diabetic, not all the time, but it's a good connector to, I mostly see type 2 diabetic patients, but this one type 1 diabetic patient, she had the Omnipod, and I was just talking to her about it, and I've never tested one or worn one. And I was like, it always looks so bulky, always looks so big. And for those Diabuddies out there that are Omnipod listeners, you're probably like, it's definitely not. But like from the pictures, it looks like it. It looks like it's this big thing on your arm. And so after talking about it and whatever, and I typically don't even see her. One of my colleagues sees her as a chiropractic patient, and then next time I saw her, she brought in an actual Omnipod to me. She's like, here you go. And I was like, I thought she was just like showing. I was like, oh wow, that is pretty thin. That's cool. And she was like, no, like, do I have it here next to me? No, it's in my storage. And she was like, no, this is for you. Like, I want, like, you can try it. And in my head, I was like, this is awesome. But I was like, at the same time,
that's awesome.
I don't have the pump. I don't have the device.
Oh yeah, you can't even use it.
There's no point. Like, I don't have it. I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
It was a kind of a funny thing between diabetics that, one of the things that you and I like doing is just talking about our numbers, right? And as trying to create with this podcast and this community, almost, trying to just create a space where people can feel comfortable, that. And I know we have other ideas of that, and it'd be cool to do a hangout. And I mean, Ronnie Miller has his whole what's his
bolus and barbells.
Bolus and barbells event. Now that the world is opening up, like I definitely want to fly out to wherever he's at next time when he does, and I want to join one of those, because I think if you're a diabetic out there and you don't have another Diabuddy where you can just talk, let us almost like match you. That'd be what a Tinder for diabetics. Swipe right or left for MDI.
Yeah.
EGM or figure sticks. So, but having somebody to talk to like this is absolutely huge, I think. And so I always enjoy talking to you, Grady, about blood sugar and just random things like that happen in the office and whatnot. But yeah, it was totally random to have that type 1 patient just give me an Omnipod. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah, it's nice. It's like, I mean, like we're all as diabetics are curious about different technologies that we have access to, but sometimes we can't necessarily pull the trigger because it's not like we can just try it all. We kind of are put into a position where we have to pick one based off of the marketing of whatever company, and hopefully it's good. If it's not, okay, in 4 years we can get a different one. So it's nice. It's always nice to kind of check out whatever other people are doing and how they're treating their diabetes and managing it. and kind of getting ideas and maybe thinking about, maybe that might be a good thing for me, or, I see how it works for them, but I don't see how it would work as well for me. So,
Right. And it's training technologies and what we all know and don't know from one another. And because there's no diabetic God, there's no one person that knows it all, right? Like we survive as a collective community. I think one that's really cool what I see online and diabetic Facebook groups is, when there's a disaster of some kind, and people are in need, like, hey, I need extra supplies, can anybody spare? And like people like are so willing to give extra supplies out to one another. I think that's really beautiful.
yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, like if somebody's never done something before, like I saw on pages, like I have them on like a diabetic Arizona page, and people are asking about these different hikes that they go on, or,
Oh,
I've never gone on a hike. How does it affect your blood sugar being in the heat, or what do I need to bring? How long am I going to be out there? Or like kayaking. How do you go kayaking and like protect your pump, or bring stuff, or, just simple stuff like that where you've never done something, so you don't know like what you would need to do. I mean, you hardly even know what you need to do as a human being, let alone what you need to prepare for as a diabetic. So it's nice to go on those pages and just ask, like, hey, I'm going to do this. What do I need to do to navigate this successfully?
absolutely. And uh, today somebody was just even asking me about CGMs. And so is a patient of mine who's a type 2 diabetic. And he's been needing to get his lifestyle under control. And so, yeah, I'm like, all right, Grady, it's just looking at you now. That's not his name, HIPAA, whatever. But, Grady, are you ready? Do you want to schedule that, nutrition lifestyle consult yet? And he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about it. And, I really need to. And this is why. And so he's definitely a little bit more motivated, at stages of change. He's almost past the contemplation phase of stages of change. But talk to him. I was like, yeah, it'll help your blood sugar, this and that. We can definitely get this under control. And I forgot how we started talking about CGMs, but he's like, oh yeah, I can't do the finger prick. It scares me. It hurts. And I was like, so you're just not checking? He's like, no, I'm not. And given type 2 a little bit different scenario than what we're doing. And I was like, well, you definitely need a CGM. We definitely need to be talking about these things.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, but does that hurt? And I show him the Dexcom. I was like, it's, it might, depending on how you put it in. I've had some bleeders before, but typically no. And he's like, it doesn't stay on. I was like, I'm adjusting all day, every day. I just adjust to you. It didn't come off. He's like, oh, that's true. So it's he's this guy's even at this position where, training technology, he doesn't even really know that much about a CGM, and he's in his 50s, and as a type 2 diabetic, where somebody is at the point where they're not even checking their blood sugar because of XYZ, fear-based reasons. And as a diabetic, type 1 or type 2, I'm not a big it should be called different numbers. I think you and I have talked about that. It's all diabetes. Like, we need to accept that. But regardless, we should always be willing to share, and what technologies work and don't work, and how we do things, and whatever else. And so it's what we're doing, and how we live affects one another every day. And so I think communicating as much as possible with one another about these things is drastically important.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. So before we go and close out this episode of the podcast, we wanted to talk a little bit about the state of what's going on. We've kind of been posting a little bit less, both on social media and these episodes. So essentially, what's going on? Dr. Grady and I are starting to get a little bit busier in different parts of our lives, and so we're taking a temporary break from after this episode, from creating content and posting episodes on a regular basis. So first of all, we wanted to thank everyone and all our listeners up to this point who have joined us and given us your ear and shared this podcast. This is all organically grown podcast. We haven't run ads. We don't have sponsors. It's just him and I doing the social media poorly. and so we've entirely been growing this past, year and 7 months or whatever, purely on your word of mouth. So just thank you for listening and sending us your questions up to this point. And we hope you continue to do that, even that we're not regularly posting, the podcast.
Yeah. It's been cool to see the interactions that we've gotten from people, and also just been really fun interviewing people and talking to other diabetics, because like we said, it's fun talking to each other, me and Garrett, but it's also fun hearing different stories, because me and Garrett have a lot of similar interests and similar lifestyles, and so it's nice to kind of see what other people are doing and how they're managing their diabetes and what things they've overcome too. So that's been a really fun journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of guests, of course, a year and some change, we've had 10 guests on the podcast, mostly from the US, one from Hong Kong / Singapore, depending on where Jay is in the world right now. And, we've had downloads in more than 43 countries in the world. It's just him and I, and we're not doing this for any ego, but just trying to connect and see that and share that there's more to diabetes than being super strict, to following dogmas, but as well as of self-destructive patterns, and the fact that we can get some of these messages across to so many people throughout so many countries, the couple thousand downloads we've had for the podcast has been amazing, and I find it interesting that, what people like to hear and not hear versus what's downloaded more and not. Our most downloaded episode was episode 31, which was our Diabetes 101, metformin versus berberine, which was the second most downloaded being our introduction.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's funny comparing those two. And I could say, we've definitely gained different skills in a year and a couple of months of hosting the podcast, interviewing, creating content. And, those first few episodes are probably garbage compared to some of the ones we've done recently.
Yeah, I don't even want to go back and listen to
them. But a lot of the pause is, we're busy. Dr. Grady has been, he just moved to Phoenix, Arizona. Where in Phoenix are you at?
Gilbert.
Okay, so he just moved, so he's starting up a practice there that we kind of talked about in Gilbert, Arizona. So if anyone is near the Gilbert, Phoenix, Arizona, and wants to be treated by the Dr. Grady Donahoe, for chiropractic, nutrition, functional medicine, whatever have you, hit him up and reach out to us. We can definitely get you connected. But he's starting a new adventure, creating this practice over there. And then my practice in Milwaukee, Wisconsin is getting busier and busier every day. And that's drawing a lot of my energy and time. And, I'm working on finishing my master's here. And I'm sure we have a whole plan of episodes we want to do, when we get back, things ranging from more sciencey, like, probiotics and more gut health stuff, and specifically diabetes, to, different types of guests, to things like, breastfeeding babies and what that type of early impact has on potential onset of diabetes. There's a whole slew of things that Dr. Grady and I want to talk about and share with y'all and continue to meet. And so we hope that during this hiatus that you guys are continuing to be subscribed. Don't leave us, and just watch for our content, kind of like, before we get going, and we'll kind of make some announcements before we start posting more episodes. But it's going to be it was a fun, year and some change, and we can't wait to get back to it here shortly.
Yeah. It's it'll be good to kind of take a break for us, just because it'll give us time to plan a little bit more. Plus, at the same time, hopefully we can make the whole process a little bit more efficient, so we can put out more content, because we aren't tied up doing a bunch of other stuff behind the scenes. That's kind of been the biggest inhibitor for us, is we just had to do a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And so we don't put out a lot of content on social media. we don't necessarily post as many podcasts as we were planning on doing originally. And that's just because it's very time consuming doing the administrative aspect of things. And so we're going to hopefully get a system down to make it a little bit more efficient. So that way we can get more content out to you guys and provide more value.
Right. So, with that, because we like to, we want to give as much as we can to whoever we're serving. Right. And so when it comes to our patients, we want to be able to serve our patients as much as we can. When it comes to our listeners, we want to be able to give to you guys as much as possible. So in helping us doing that, I'm going to give 2 calls to action before season 1 of the Diabuddies podcast is over. First call to action is, one thing that's definitely been lacking is more, female and women health representation on the podcast. We've tried to, get connected with a handful.
Yeah, we've tried to reach out to several of them, but we just haven't gotten a whole lot of people who want to come on the podcast to talk about those things or have experience with those things. So if you know somebody, please either have them reach out to us or, give us their contact information so we can maybe set something up.
Right, because we'd love to be more balanced. We know we're just 2 broy dudes on the podcast, but we like to think holistically and include a lot of people, and so that's definitely something that was for sure in season 1 underrepresented for sure. So give us if you want to get connected, help us get connected, that'd be great. So second call to action is continue to share it. Even that we're not releasing new episodes. Our episodes are still available for download and sharing. So, continue to do that and continue to send in your emails and your questions. And there's still a couple of things that, I want to be involved in with the podcast. And I know Grady does too. So, just continue to keep involved. And, season 2 will be coming out here in a few months' time. But right now, this is an official wrap on season 1.
Yep. So it'll be a good chance for people to catch up if they're behind on the episodes. But if you're listening to this, you're probably caught up. So Have
you ever listened to our episodes at 2 times speed on the player, Grady?
I listen to everything at 2 times speed. When I'm editing, I'm listening to it at 2 times speed.
2 times speed. Oh, okay. I was about to say, well, if you're trying to catch up, we don't sound that good for 2 times speed. So that is an official end to season 1. So I'm going to do a little clap and thank you again for everyone. Much appreciated. We can't wait to continue the journey with y'all.
Yes.
So with that, we'll catch you guys here shortly on season 2 of the Diabuddies podcast in the near future.
See ya.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found value in today's conversation, we would appreciate it if you gave a 5-star review. It really helps us branch out our community and get our message across to those who really need to hear it. If you want to interact with us on social media, you can follow us on the Diabuddies podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or moral outrages, you can email us at thediabuddiespodcast@gmail.com. Thanks.